So hi guys, in this video I will be explaining you about a Spring Boot roadmap, Spring Boot plus microservices roadmap that we can discuss, so that we need to follow those step-by-step blueprints so that you don't need to learn each and everything for interview purpose. Okay, so what all things are very much crucial and which I have learned from my interview experiences, that I will be going to share it with you. So let's get can see my screen now. So in this video, I will be explaining you these things, Spring Boot and microservices interview roadmap. So let's see what all things are required for interview purpose. First of all, we need to understand that why we should go for learning Spring Boot. Okay, because there are a lot of factors which helps us to implement a particular REST API or particular application. Okay, and in project development. So in Spring Boot, what's the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? This is one of the famous question that has been asked whenever you are going ahead with Spring Boot interview questions. So basic difference will be what? Spring, there are a lot of configurations you have to make in the pom.xml file. You have to do a lot of configurations there. But in Spring Boot, the main focus will be on writing the business logic and not on the doing configuration part. So that's a basic advantage that you have to put for Spring Boot. Second is Spring Boot provides rapid application development process. Okay, so what does that mean? So your project or your application will be production ready in a very short span of time. Why? Because you are not focusing upon writing the configuration part. Okay, you are not setting up the configuration at such a deep level. Okay, basic configuration you have to do at a properties level only, and you are good to go. Your focus should be only on writing the business logic. That's a major advantage. Number second. Third advantage is auto configuration feature will be available for us. Okay, so what does that mean? You don't have to download specifically dependency and add it into the class path or the libraries. So as soon as you add a particular dependency in the pom.xml, it will download that dependency for you. Okay, so that's the advantage for Spring Boot over Spring. Okay, so it simplifies common web development tasks like REST APIs and other type of development tasks. Okay, and it provides wide range of tools and integrations. Okay, so you can see there will be like we can make use of actuator. Okay, so we can measure our health metrics of the application, like how the health is going on after your development. Okay, so these are some of the things which helps us to go ahead with Spring Boot, and we can understand now like what type of questions are being asked for the interview purpose. Okay, so this was just an intro like why we should move ahead with Spring Boot and why it's in so high demand. Okay, let's understand some basic, then we will go towards intermediate, and then we will see like advanced level questions that can be asked in an interview. Okay, so a lot of things are there to discuss, so let's tune to that. So let's tune to the end. Okay, so first of all, like how can you create a Spring Boot project? It's a basic level freshers based questions that can be asked, like can you create one normal Spring Boot application? Can you create one normal hello world based project? So how can you do that? So first of all, you need to go to here start.spring.io. Then you have to select a particular project type, like which one you want to select, either Maven or Gradle. You have to select a project type. Okay, so what are these two, Maven and Gradle? These two also we need to understand. These are build automation tools. Okay, it helps us to build your entire project. Then comes which language you want to prefer, like Java, Kotlin, Ruby. You can go ahead with Java, so as per your language. Then Spring Boot, which one is a stable version that you have to go ahead with, not a snapshot one. Okay, we have to go ahead with a stable version. So 3.4.0, 3.3.6, these two are stable version that I can see. But the recent one we need to go ahead with. So recent one is 3.4.0. Okay, then we have to set this group, artifact name, description, package name. You know about all these things. Then at the right hand side there is a section to add dependencies. So here you can add some Spring Starter dependencies. Okay, so you can add some dev tool kind of dependency. Okay, so any other type of dependency, let's suppose you want to add some Spring Cloud feature that you want to enable, or you want to add some actuator related feature, so those all dependencies you can add it over here. Okay, so this is the basic and simple way to create your own Spring Boot starter project. So this is the first question that can be asked to freshers. Okay, second type of question that can be asked to freshers is what are Maven and what's a Maven life cycle. Okay, same about Gradle. What's a Gradle and what's a Gradle life cycle, and how you find these two different, like how Maven is different from Gradle. Okay, so this question can also be asked. So make sure that you learn about it, the difference between Maven and Gradle. Okay, when to use what. Okay, so basically I have made use of like 90% of the time I have made use of Maven only. So it's like very good. Basically it's a clean install process, a build process, all the commands are very much in handy. And Gradle is also very much useful. So you can prefer like whichever you want to go ahead with, you can go ahead with. Okay. So you can go ahead with the differences between Maven and Gradle. It is important for interview purpose. Then you have to understand what are the key annotations of Spring Boot. There are various type of annotations, right? There are certain stereotype annotations are present, like at the controller, is controller, then service, then repositories, at the repository. So these are some of the stereotype annotations that can be, that is of most important one. That's a starting point, okay, in MVC architecture of Spring. Then comes the internal annotations, like at the request mapping to map the particular endpoint to particular UI, like what request the UI is making to a particular endpoint, we need to map it, right? What kind of operation that particular method is doing, that particular endpoint is doing, that we have to specify. Like if there is saving the data into database, then we have to go ahead with post mapping. Then if we want to fetch the data from database, we have to go ahead with get mapping. We have to save data or we have to update data into database, we have to go with put mapping or patch mapping. Okay, so what's the difference between put and patch? So this is also very important for interview purpose. Okay, and if you want to delete some record from database, you can go ahead with delete mapping. So these are the basic mapping structure which is being asked in the interview, and it is important for your REST API implementation as well. Okay, so learn that as well. Okay, next question will be on profiling and configurations in Spring Boot. So questions can be asked like, how can you add profile to your Spring Boot application? Okay, so there are various kind of profiles that you can add, right? So within that profile, there is an annotation like @profile. Okay, and within that @profile, you can add like what kind of profile you want that Spring Boot application to run the project upon. Okay, so there are various kind of profiles, right? Yeah, so you can create different type of configurations for different kind of profiles. Okay, so let's suppose you want to set your profile for SIT environment, then you can add it like at a profile, you can add SIT. Okay, or you can put it in a YAML file or properties file as well. It depends totally upon you whether you want to go ahead with the annotation way or you want to go ahead with the setting the properties in the application.properties or YAML file basically. So it's totally up to you. So this is one of the way to add configuration to your project. Okay, then there's something called a scope also. Then they can ask you like what kind of scope you want to add your particular method or particular class with. Okay, so scope can be of various type, right? It can be right singleton, prototype, okay, request, session, global session. There are various kind of scopes, so we have to choose based upon our requirements, like what kind of scope you are preferably making use of in a later point of time or now. Okay, so based upon that we need to choose which one you want to go ahead with. So profiling and scope, these two is very important. It looks to be a little smaller and very less in understanding part, but it's asked in the interview basically. What is a profile? What's your scope? Okay, how many types of scopes are available? So this type of questions can also be asked in the interview. Okay, so next set of question is to learn about request mapping, how to map the request which UI is sending to the backend side. So this I have already explained you just 2 minutes back what kind of request mappings are available. Okay, so apart from that, when you go ahead with inside, so if it is safe, you have to go ahead with having request body at the request body annotation. Okay, then you can have path variable also when you have to send some ID or some specific keyword which we need to map it. It can be primary key of the table. Okay, that ID we need to map it to the particular table into the database, okay, to save the data. So we need to send some ID from the UI. So you can have that, you can take that ID from the UI through path variable. Okay, so this is one of the way that we can understand. Okay, so if you want to send ID in the header part, sorry, if you want to send ID in the URL part, you can add it with slash, then curly braces, flower braces, then you have to add ID. Okay, or if you want to send everything in the payload part, then you need to have the request body annotation. Okay, so this is the way to handle the data from the UI part. Then understanding path variable and request parameter handling, that I have already told you. Okay, the request parameter will be having some key value pair. Okay, so there can be something like question mark, then key equal to value. Okay, and key equal to value and key equal to value. Like that, the data will be passing from the URL side. Okay, and in the backend side, we need to add it in the particular method with annotation at the request param, at the request param annotation. Okay, so this annotation is also very much important. Then next question will be, how will you set up the database like PostgreSQL, H2 database, MySQL database? How can you do the setup of this? And in one project, let's suppose there are multiple databases are being used. then how will you set up all those databases in one single Spring Boot application? That type of question can also be asked. Okay, how to set up two databases in one single Spring Boot application project. So that also you need to go ahead with. So these configurations can be done in the properties file or YAML file. And to add multiple database configuration in your particular Spring Boot application, then you need to add some other configuration classes also you need to create for that. So you can go ahead with that as well. If you want me to create separate video on the database setup, do let me know in the comment box. Then how to use JPA and CRUD repository in the project. This is also very much crucial for interview perspective. So interviewer may ask difference between CRUD repository, JPA repository, and normal repositories, and paging and sorting repository. What's the differences between all these? When to go for which particular repository? What's the hierarchy of this repository? So those are also very important for interview. Okay, so at a top level, it will be like, let's suppose if we go ahead from the bottom part. So bottom will be like a CRUD repository, then will be paging and sorting repository, then there will be JPA repository, and then there will be the main repository interface. So this is the hierarchy structure for all your repository layers. So JPA repository, if you are making use of, let's suppose, batching of batch operations you are making use of along with the CRUD operation. So CRUD repository, if you are making use of, it will only give you functionalities with respect to CRUD operation like create, read, update, delete, but it will not give you operation help with respect to batch save. If you want to save data in multiple batches, then CRUD operation will not help you. CRUD repository will not help you in that. Okay, so for that you need to implement JPA repository. So as per our requirements, like when to do what kind of functionality, first we have to understand that, and then after that we need to select like which repo you want to go ahead with. Okay, so basically we generally go ahead with JPA repository to enhance our functionality and to scale our microservice at a higher level. Okay, because at next stage, let's suppose when it is getting scale at a higher level, at that point of time there is high chance that more and more customers will be logging into our REST API. Okay, in that scenario CRUD will not help you out. You need to master multi-threading there. You need to implement multi-threading, you need to implement Spring Batch. So in that scenarios CRUD will not help you out. Okay, you need to make use of JPA as well. Okay, you can make use of JDBC template also, but Spring JPA is most widely used. Okay, so this is the way to use JPA and CRUD repository or paging and sorting repositories in your project. So paging and sorting repositories will be used when you need to save, like let's suppose 10 record or 15 records per page. Okay, so there are multiple sites. Okay, when you go to a particular website, let's suppose you are going to Amazon or Google. Best example I'm giving you, if you are searching something on Google, are you seeing everything in one single page? No, right? There can be 15-20 pages after first page. So how will you get to know like which particular, how will you set like which values should be there in first page, which values should be there in the second page? So it can be like multiple factors which it depends upon. So let's suppose it depends upon popularity. Some pages are very much popular, so those should be displayed in the first page, and those who are less popular, it will be going to subsequent pages. So those kind of functionality handling can be done with the help of paging and sorting repository. So that is also very much crucial for interview purpose. Okay, so it stores data in the page type of interface, and then you can fetch the data out of it, and then you can save it. Okay, so there is a different type of operation that can be handled with page. Okay, so let's understand the next question. So next question is Spring Boot dev tools and hot reloading. What's this? Okay, so this is also very important for interview. So interviewer can ask you like, if we want to reload the page after making any change, so what we generally do, if we make any kind of change, we are stopping the Tomcat server and then we are restarting the Tomcat server again. So it may take some more time. Okay, so anywhere, anytime, if you are making very small or minor change, again and again, you need to restart your Tomcat server. So it takes a lot of our time. Okay, so for that, to save that, you need to add Spring Boot dev tool as a dependency in your pom.xml. Once you add that dependency, then after that, whenever you make any minor change or major change, it will auto reload. Okay, so either you can just save it, okay, and then you can do right click, and then there will be option to reload, okay, at compile time. So it will reload the entire project and you don't need to restart your Tomcat server. So this is the major advantage of making use of Spring Boot dev tool, and which is also called as hot reloading. It's reloading the entire project by reloading that particular class. Okay, next, so Spring Batch and scheduling. This is also very much crucial. Okay, so there can be like millions of records in a particular file that you want to transfer to a database. The database can be S2 database, it can be in memory, it can be Postgres, it can be Oracle, it can be it can be any type of database. Okay, so how should you transfer the data or copy the data from that file. It can be any kind of file like dat file or Excel file or TXT file. You need to fetch the data from the database and save the data into, so that it can be like a vice versa. Okay, you can fetch the data from that file to database or from database to the file. Both can be done via Spring Batch. Okay, so how to implement Spring Batch? I've already created video on that. You can just search it out in my video section. You will get to know. So Spring Batch is also very much crucial and it is asked in interview as well. And how will you schedule those? Like which jobs will be scheduled first? Okay, what kind of multi-threading features you are making use of in your project? Okay, the multi-threading is also very much crucial for interview purpose. Okay, so go through those things. Okay, then these are basic level phase one question that can be asked in an interview. Second type of question that can be asked is the intermediate level. Intermediate level is if you are having more than 3 to 4 years of experience and till 7 to 8 years of experience, they are mostly coming under intermediate section. Okay, so let's see like what kind of questions can be asked in the intermediate level of Spring Boot. Okay, yeah, so let's understand the phase two level. So questions can be asked on exception handling. Okay, so how will you handle exception with respect to Spring Boot application? So this question may be asked in the basic level also, the freshers also, but it is mostly asked in the intermediate level. Okay, so how will you handle exception? So you need to make use of controller advice, and then within that you have to make use of exception handler annotation. Okay, so how will you make use of all these, that we have to understand. Okay, or you have to create your own custom exception class, and that also you can make use of over here. Totally depends upon you and your requirements, like what kind of requirements you are getting, but questions can be asked on exception handling as well. Okay, so prepare on this. Then questions can be asked on transaction management. How are you managing the transaction? Like there are various ways, right? There can be like at the rate rollback you are making use of. Then what kind of isolation levels you are making use of? Okay, there can be read committed, read uncommitted, serializable. There are various kinds, right? So those all things also we need to understand. Okay, so transaction management is very much important. You need to have at the rate transaction, then rollback for what kind of rollback you are making use of, where you are putting rollback at the class level, at the method level. So this is very much crucial. Okay, and what is distributed transaction? How transaction is getting distributed across your multiple layers of microservices? So this question is directly linked with this transaction management. So understand those two aspects. Okay, first understand what is distributed transaction, then understand this transaction management, then you will get a better picture of it. Then this question is most commonly asked if they are asking about Spring Boot. Okay, then they will not leave Spring Security. So this question will be asked like, how are you securing your REST APIs? Okay, so you just can't just create REST API and leave it as it is. It will be very much harmful. Okay, like any particular person can attack your API and they can fetch the data out of your database. Okay, so you need to make your REST API secure. Okay, otherwise it will become very much vulnerable. So how can you implement Spring Security? So it can be done with various ways, like JWT token you can make use of, OAuth you can make use of, Okta you can make use of. There are various ways, or some companies have their own security mechanism to secure their REST APIs. So this kind of implementation is also very much important for interview. So learn each and everything. Okay. So first and foremost important thing is JWT. Try to understand JWT first, how we can implement that and why to use that and what's the functionality, okay, present within it. So those kind of thing we have to understand, like header, payload, signature, what all things are present within that. Okay, just try to understand that. Then token, how token is getting generated, what's the time span of those session tokens, so those things. And then OAuth, after completing JWT, then you go ahead with understanding OAuth. Okay, then hate OS. So hate OS is just a way to make client interact with our REST APIs. So how flexibly we can make our client interact with our REST API, that will can take care of with hate OS. Okay, so this is also very important for interview purpose. Then versioning, how will you make your Spring Boot API with a different versions? Okay, there can be different versions of a particular endpoint, right? So how will you make your endpoint version controlled? Okay, so there can be different version, like version slash API 1 or version slash API 2. There can be different versions of the same API endpoints. So those kind of versionings are also very important with respect to URI parameter change, or let's suppose some header versioning change. It can be any kind of change. So versioning API is very much crucial. Okay, so try to learn that as well. Then unit testing and Mockito is very much important. Like how are you making How are you testing your endpoint? Okay, so REST API endpoint testing is also very much crucial. So there it can be making use of JUnit and Mockito. So those things also we have to understand. Okay, so JUnit and Mockito, mock MVC, how will you mock static methods? Then what happen will with constructor, can we mock that or not? Okay, what will happen with final fields? Okay, final methods, can we mock them or not? So these kind of questions can also be asked. Then how can you mock the properties file data? Like application or properties file, it may have key value pairs. So how will you mock that? So that type of question can also be asked. Okay, then integration testing with the help of Cucumber. Cucumber is one of the tool with the help of which you can do BDD, like business driven development integration testing end to end. So how can you do end to end testing with the help of Cucumber? That also is crucial. Okay, so this is called integration testing. Okay, so previous one was class to class level testing. This one is integration testing end to end. Okay, so both we need to understand for interview purpose. Then Spring Boot actuator. How are you maintaining the health of your REST endpoints? Okay, so to maintain the REST endpoint health, we have to make use of Spring Boot actuator. So after implementing Spring Boot actuator and going to the particular URL like slash actuator slash beans, there can be various types of URLs available for Spring Boot actuator to get the visibility of what's the current health status of your application. Okay, so this type of question can also be asked like, can you create your own custom actuator? Okay, so after implementing actuator, what kind of URLs can you visit and what you will see over there? Okay, what's the importance of implementing Spring Boot actuator? These are some of the variations of questions that can be asked with Spring Boot actuator. Okay, then let's understand some questions at a phase 3 level, which is a little advanced level, like 6+ years or 7+ years of experience. Okay, so understanding profile is a common thing. Scope, profile, like what is Spring Boot, difference between Spring and Spring Boot, auto configuration feature, okay, stereotype annotations, questions on beans and its configuration, how to make use of bean class. Okay, so these type of questions are commonly asked, okay, irrespective of how many years of experience you have. But apart from that, what kind of different question that can be asked? So let's understand. So questions can be on like Spring Cloud. Okay, so what kind of libraries you are fetching the data for Spring Cloud? Okay, how are you configuring that in pom.xml? What dependencies you are making use of? How are you implementing circuit breaker design pattern to make your microservices fault tolerant? How are you setting up Eureka server, and how are you registering your services through service registry? So this type of question can be asked with respect to microservice, because once your experience level is more, so interviewer will not only focus upon Spring Boot, they will focus upon microservices as well. So questions can come from microservices. How are you deploying your microservices? Okay, so build and deployment process based questions can be asked. What kind of scripts you are writing? How are you writing your scripts to integrate the particular Jenkins pipeline so that it automatically gets triggered once you push your code changes? So how that entire process works, so those kind of questions can also be asked. Okay, so integrating Spring Cloud to your application project, so how are you doing that end to end, they can ask. So these are some advanced level questions. Okay, then API gateway question based question, like how are you maintaining the security of your application and how it is being controlled via API gateway, how API gateway decides like this endpoint will go to which particular method in the controller, okay, or in the REST controller. So this is being decided by API gateway. So it enhances the security part basically. So understanding the each and every aspect of API gateway is very much crucial, and Spring Cloud gateway that I already shared with you. Okay, then connecting Spring Boot apps to Spring Cloud config server. How will you connect that Spring Boot applications to Spring Cloud config server? So those all things can be asked. Okay, so you need to register that. Okay, you need to configure those properties. Okay, in the properties file, and then provide that configuration. So there's Spring Boot Cloud config dependencies that we have to import, and then after that we have to make use of in our configuration process. Then understanding microservice, like what are the design patterns present in microservice, like Saga design pattern. Within there will be like a choreography and orchestration based design patterns. Okay, so these two are basic level design patterns. Then how does it work? Some real scenario based question that can be asked with the help of microservice design patterns. Okay, so what's a event driven microservice? Okay, what's a event driven service? So this kind of question can also be asked. Okay, distributed transaction that I've already told you. Then this design pattern that I've already told you, this is also very much crucial. They can ask you some real time based scenarios, like where can we go for choreography, where can we go ahead with orchestration, what's the difference between choreography and orchestration based design pattern. So learn that as well. Then how can you make two microservices communicate with each other? That is inter-service communication. Okay, so there are two ways to do that. Either you can go ahead with synchronous way, like with the help of REST template, or you can go ahead with asynchronous communication like RabbitMQ or Kafka. Okay, so depending upon our requirement, we can choose any one of them. So inter-service communication is very much crucial, and questions can be asked based upon that as well. So like in 90% of the interviews, this question was asked. So prepare this concept well. Okay, then what is resilience for 4J? So in microservice, there's a way to make your microservice fault tolerant. Okay, so let's suppose there are multiple inter-service calls are happening, and out of that, third or fourth call is failing. Okay, so how will you make your service fault tolerant in that scenario? Okay, so for that, you need to implement resilience 4J. Okay, so how will you implement that? What type of configurations you need to add? How will you implement circuit breakers? So these type of questions can also be asked. Okay, so what is distributed tracing? How to set up the Spring Cloud sleuth? Okay, how will you trace the particular issue in your microservice? It's very difficult to trace errors in your microservice because it's internally connecting with multiple services. So how will you how will you do distributed tracing, and how will you visualize those traces with the help of Jipkins? So this type of questions may be asked. Okay, then Spring Cloud bus integration with RabbitMQ and Kafka. How RabbitMQ and Kafka is important to fetch the data. Okay, and in what type of scenarios you are making use of Kafka, how Kafka is being worked internally, like how brokers are implemented, how partitioning is there, how data is stored within those partitions. So those kind of questions can also be asked. And then producer consumer related problems. Okay, how it will be solved. So how data is being fetched at the producer level, how producer produces the data, and how consumer consumes the data. With the help of Kafka, they can ask you questions based upon that. Okay, then implement some real world based project they can ask you. So with the help of RabbitMQ, Kafka, or with the help of real world scenarios, they can tell you like implement this endpoint. Okay, so they will give some scenarios like book management system or employee management system. They will give you some scenarios. I want to save the data in database, like there can be millions of records coming. How will you save those data in database? To implement cache mechanism. Okay, how will you implement caching like Redis cache and all? Okay, so these kind of questions can be merged with it. Okay, like caching concept is very much important. Okay, then they can tell you like how will you manage multiple employee records. If let's suppose for some employees want to buy books from a store and some people want to buy online, so how will you handle those kind of scenarios? So what design patterns will you be making use of? Like strategy design pattern will be very much useful. So design pattern based questions can also be asked. Okay, so it's all interlinked. You cannot separate Java with Spring Boot with microservice. All are linked with each other. Okay, so how will you implement real world project is very much crucial to understand. So try to build some 2 to 3 projects that will give you much more confidence in the interview. Okay, and let me know in the comment box what's your final thought on this particular Spring Boot roadmap for interview purpose. I'm eagerly waiting for your reply. So if there is any feedback you want to give, you can give comment in the comment box. Okay, and if you want to make me videos on some other type of topics which you want me to make, okay, you can that also comment like what type of videos you want me to create. Okay, so yeah, this was it for this roadmap purpose. So I have completely covered Spring Boot plus microservice, which is most commonly asked in interview. Okay, so see you in the next video with the next set of topics. Till then, it's Devjit Roy signing off. Bye bye.